Corinthian Point development, which brought more than 500 homes. There's a pharmacy, there's retail, there is a childcare facility. All of those vertical development, all of those improvements, the community basically came upon as a result of the creation of a TIRZ.
From City Hall in downtown Houston, this is 901 Bagby, inside the mayor's office. This week, how does a city reinvest in itself? We're joined by Houston's Chief Economic Development Officer, Gwendolyn Tillotson-Bell. Gwen, good to see you. Thanks for coming to 901 Bagby.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to see you as well.
So what I love about our show is that we get to learn about how the city works and those who are working for us. And you're one of those people who's been in economic development in the city for over a decade and now is the Chief Economic Development Officer. This is a pretty big role for you, but it's not unfamiliar to it. How have you kind of attacked this role as you've been in it so far?
Yeah. So let me start by saying I started this role when I was 12. Since you said a decade. I came to the city in a very unique way, first of all. So my background has been primarily in the private sector. And about 20 years ago, I was approached by the city to come in to do some financial modeling and to really help the city to be able to make really good, well-informed decisions using data. And that was my introduction to the city. And 6 years after that, I was recruited by Mayor Parker and my chief development officer. His name is Andy. And they together thought that I would be a really good person for this position, just given my background. I'd worked a lot with contract negotiations. I'd worked a lot with the public through my private work. And I enjoyed the financial modeling. So they knew that I could help make good decisions. And that's how it started. I don't know that very many people walk into economic development. It's one of those industries that's not very known about. So you just kind of happen upon economic development, and that's what happened.
I feel like it's the same for the public, right? We think about economic development when a big project is starting or when it finishes, but there's all this downtime or the gaps in the middle where they don't even know what's going on, maybe.
Yeah, there's so much that happens. Before coming into economic development, I knew a project was coming on board when I saw scaffolding or when I saw the contractors or the construction staff in place. But there's so much that happens to put in the infrastructure, and economic development is a lot of that, is really preparing an area community to receive private investment. And sometimes that's putting in the infrastructure. Sometimes that's partnering with the developer to make sure that the right type of development happens.
So how would you describe in that case the role of the Chief Economic Development Officer, duties, responsibilities? I mean, some of this maybe you even take personally.
A lot of it I take personal. So we are responsible for really establishing the policies, the practices, the protocol by which we attract investment. We also establish what type of investment makes sense for the city. And if you drill down even further, what type of investment makes sense for communities that make up the city. All of our communities have very different needs when it comes to economic development. So it's impossible to have a one-size-fit-all approach. And so we have to look at economic development from a macro level, like when we look at industries. What are our competitive industries? Where are some industries that we have the opportunity to create smaller sub-industries, right? And sometimes we have to look at what's happening within the communities. Are we attracting the right type of investments and businesses to hire the community that it serves, right? To the extent that we have good alignment, it means good economic development.
So then how is a board formed? How does that come together? And what role might an average everyday Houstonian have in that?
An average everyday Houstonian could actually serve on the board. So the statute governs how many board members may be in a TIRZ, because again, it goes based on the number of jurisdictions. So most TIRZ boards comprise of 7 board members. And the board members are appointed, 5 of those members are appointed by the mayor. And then 2 of those board members are reserved for if there are other jurisdictions. So in the past, it was maybe the county, maybe the school district, maybe another entity. And if after 2 years there has not been any other participants, then the mayor may elect the additional 2. So these appointments come from the mayor. In some cases, for instance, where we have Harris County or Fort Bend County participating, those counties are also allowed to appoint a member, or in some cases, multiple members. But they're all coming from a vetting process. But there's no criteria established that says you, in order to serve on the board, you have to have this professional background. So that voice and those various different voices can really inform the priorities and how we can execute them. Because remember, we are constructing things. So, a person with a financial background that understands a budget, a person with an engineering background. We have people that have medical backgrounds because their attention to detail is meticulous. We have women who are entrepreneurs. We have stay-at-home dads. I mean, you could have, because you're all contributing something different and you're bringing in a different perspective. And I think to the extent that we could gel all of those perspectives, it means that we have considered all of the different stakeholder interests when we have that diversity in our board.
Everybody's at the table.
Everybody's at the table. And for every TIRZ, as I mentioned, there is a counter redevelopment authority. It's the same people, it's just that they wear different hats because a TIRZ is just a zone. A TIRZ doesn't have the authority to enter into a contract, right? The redevelopment authority is able to do that using the resources generated by the TIRZ. So that's why those two are in tandem.
That's why they need to be connected, sure.
Yes.
So what are some of the tools that you have in your disposal, tools in your tool bag to go attract that investment to the city, and what maybe some of those partnerships look like?
So we have, there are 8 economic development programs within my office. Some of those programs are utilized more frequently, or they may have a larger impact. So for instance, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone is probably the program that is utilized the most because of the amount of resources that is allocated to that program to serve the larger city of Houston. And we can talk more about that because I know that that's a hot topic and people are very curious about our TIRZ program. But there's also tax abatement. Tax abatements are very effective for attracting employers where there is a large job generation. And we've seen those be highly effective. We've modified and amended the ordinance that governs our tax abatement as our city has evolved, as the need to support the private sector with incentives have evolved. So has our tax abatement program. So for instance, several years ago, we created a tax abatement for green storm water infrastructure so that we could remove the cost barrier for using a green or a clean system versus a traditional system. And what we'd heard from the private sector was that it was more incrementally costly to do green. And so our goal was to remove that barrier. So to give them the option, all things staying equal, to give them the option to really start to look at building infrastructure in a way that was environmentally friendly, that was safe, but that also had some amenities that would really help to beautify the area that was being revitalized.
That's a great example. I think you're right, though. The Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, I said it wrong for many years. TIRZ brings tears to my eyes thinking of TIRZ. It's TIRZ.
Not to my eyes.
So I do want to talk about this. Obviously, as you said, it is a hot topic. TIRZ. Can you tell me maybe in a sentence or two what it is?
Okay, so you break down the word. It's an acronym that stands for Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. And there's significance to each of those words. So tax simply means that the revenue source within the TIRZ is coming from property taxes that property owners would pay to the city. There's some misconception that if a property is within the boundaries of a TIRZ, that there is this additional tax, that they're paying a new tax. There is no additional tax. To the property owner, there is no change. Pay the taxes. So the other portion is tax reinvestment. That's really critical because the way that TIRZs are successful is when there is investment or reinvestment into that area that we refer to as the zones. Without the investment, without the private sector coming into the zone and making those investments, there is no increment, right? So it's tax increment, reinvestment, and zone. So the zone is the geography. We're in Houston, we're unique in that I think we're the only city within the country that uses the TIRZ as a reference to the zone. Many cities and states refer to it as TIF. And what that means is TIF is tax increment financing. So we are applying the concepts or the approach of tax increment financing into a geographic area. Therefore, it's TIF being applied to a zone. Therefore, it's a TIRZ.
So for property owners in the zone, what you're saying essentially is that some of the property tax is reallocated to again, reinvest in that particular zone. And then the hope is, right, that the neighbors, the property owners, they see it, they feel the reinvestment, and eventually what? It just becomes a bigger, better zone.
So yes, so the way that it works so our first TIRZ was created in 1995. So our program has existed since 1995. But the way that all TIRZs work, and keep in mind that we are governed by state statute. So while Houston and other major cities are known for utilizing this program, it is a state program. It's a state statute. It's Chapter 311 of the tax code, the Texas tax code. So everything that we do, even the ordinance that we created, has to be subject to the state, right? So all of our compliance, all of our guidelines are dictated from the state. And so you create a zone the year that it was created, all of the property taxes that has been going to the general fund up until that creation continues to go to the city of Houston's general fund. So the city continues to get benefit from a TIRZ even after TIRZ is created. The incremental portion means after that base year, the property taxes, as the taxable value or the property taxes increases. And it increases, sometimes it's just natural appreciation, right? But oftentimes it's because investment is happening, new buildings are being constructed. We don't really count on homes, single-family homes, because there are some restrictions as to the amount of residential that may be contained within a zone. So again, there are some restrictions and people don't really understand that. So there are not many residential single-family homes that's within the boundaries of a TIRZ. It's primarily in commercial corridor areas. So every year that the value increases beyond the value that was established at the base year, that creates your increment. So I say all the time, private investment is really critical. We, the city, may build public facilities, but public facilities are non-taxable. So while we may make investments, that investment only benefits the TIRZ if it is a taxable private investment. That's the criticality of attracting investment.
So that's where the goal comes in. It's why when we talk about Houston, we talk about these public-private partnerships and how important they are to our development. Because without them, how would we'd have some of these other tools, but clearly TIRZ is the big one.
TIRZ is the big one. And not all TIRZs have been, I'm not going to say successful, they have not grown or increased revenue at the same rate. TIRZs are created for different purposes. So for instance, TIRZ 9, which is a TIRZ in the South Post Oak area, it was created for the purpose of building infrastructure to create single-family housing. So anyone who's familiar with Corinthian Point, that Corinthian Point development, which brought more than 500 homes, there's a pharmacy, there's retail, there is a childcare facility, all of those vertical development, all of those improvements, the community basically came upon as a result of the creation of a TIRZ because the infrastructure was critical. Infrastructure is not sexy, but you can't build a house if you don't have access to water, wastewater, storm, and the basic amenities.
So let's talk a little more about these zones. Do they last forever? Do they expire? What's the future of a zone after it's created?
So the statute does not limit a term of a TIRZ. Now, as a policy and as a practice, the city creates TIRZs with a 30-year term. So most TIRZs are created with a life of 30 years. But if you can imagine TIRZs that were created in the 1990s, the needs of the community may have changed dramatically 30 years later, 25 years later. So the city has the ability to assess and evaluate whether or not it makes sense to extend the life of a TIRZ to allow for more resources to be reinvested. Again, it has to be reinvested in the zone, and it has to be the way that we use the TIRZ funds, different from the private sector, is it has to be for public assets. And so when you think about the things that I mentioned, TIRZs are used to build public infrastructure, public facilities, those things that ultimately become assets of the city. And so people don't really think about that. So when we build streets, we convey those streets to the city. When we build a sewer system, we convey that system to the city. And those infrastructure improvements become assets on our balance sheet. And so those things are very, very important. But After the 10, 15, 20 years when TIRZs really start to be able to make those significant improvements, sometimes it's necessary. For instance, we found that 15, 20 years when there's enough increment, a TIRZ may need to build a major sewer system. It may need to redo its entire mobility grid or completely rehab or completely reconstruct a major street or roadway. You cannot do a pay-as-you-go and just wait until there's enough resources to be able to do that. So the TIRZ does have an ability to issue bonds through a local government corporation structure. So each of our TIRZs are managed, if you will, by a local government corporation that we refer to as redevelopment authorities. They're in tandem. They're kind of tethered.
Connected.
They're connected. But we have the ability to issue bonds. And so depending on the term for those bonds may warrant the need to extend the life so that we, the city, the TIRZ, gets the benefit of a better financing, an ability to spread that cost over a longer period of time so that we're not creating a burden. And all of this has to be paid with the revenue that's being generated to make sure that the TIRZ and the redevelopment authority remains financially solvent. So all of those considerations go into whether or not the city decides to extend the TIRZ.
And ultimately, do those decisions, I mean, obviously they have to fall within the statute, right, of the state and what the ordinance that we've created in the city, but where do those decisions fall? How much of them fall into your office versus council versus mayor versus anyone?
All three of those that you mentioned touch those decisions. Sometimes an extension request comes to us directly from a council person because they recognize the importance of the TIRZ program to be able to affect positive change within their council districts, right? And so they may make a petition or submit a proposal to our office for consideration of a life extension. The life extension sometimes comes from representatives in the community. Sometimes they come from the development. We typically don't just make those decisions random. We have to make sure that we're vetting them, we're assessing. We also established a set of TIRZ policies about 4 years ago that also gives a criteria that we look at for, in terms of whether or not we're going to extend the life. Is the life extension going to support a new infusion of capital, for instance? We have an example with, just to give you an example of how this works, Memorial City TIRZ has been a TIRZ that was created, I want to say in the late 1990s or the early 2000s. And the mayor visited the whole Memorial City area and recognized that there was a need for a new fire station, a new police station. We always need detention in the area. And he reached out to me and said, we have all of these needs. How can we leverage the programs that we have access to be able to work with me to make sure that we're implementing my priorities? And, had a conversation with the TIRZ board chair and some of the other members. And what we did was the TIRZ is going to issue bonds. They're going to invest $135 million to bring a public safety campus, which is going to house a new fire station, a new police station, and detention to mitigate flooding. That's a really great example of how the TIRZ program is being leveraged to make sure that we are executing on the mayor's priority.
That's a good example that almost answers my next question is why do these zones matter so much to Houston neighborhoods? And I mean, I guess public safety is a big idea, a big example, I should say, of that. And then my next question is, do neighbors living near those tiers, do a lot of the TIRZ, I did it again, do a lot of them even understand that they're so close to a tax increment reinvestment zone?
Some do. What's really great is that our communities, they're so engaged. They're very curious. They really want to play a very active civic role in improving and enhancing the communities that they call home. I would say, I've been in the Economic Development Office for 14 years, 2 of those as a Chief Economic Development Officer, thanks to Mayor Whitmire. But I've spent a lot of time, and I will tell you that community engagement, community participation has increased dramatically, I would say, over the last 6 or 7 years, in particular as it relates to the TIRZ program, because they now understand that good infrastructure, good roadways, flood mitigation, the public facilities, all of those things really are essential to making and ensuring strong, sustainable communities. And they recognize that this is a resource that they may be able to influence. So yes, the community is very much aware. And we try to, my goal in my office, whether I'm dealing with developers or negotiating a deal with another public entity, is to try to get to a mutual yes. Like we always think that there are winners and losers. In my office, I try to look at ways that we can get to a mutual yes so that you have mutual winners, right? We all may give up a little bit of something, but at the end, we all recognize that what we're doing is for the best interest of the community at large.
And you do welcome community feedback with these. You have plenty of meetings as well, right, with a lot of these projects.
Absolutely. So all of the TIRZ meetings are public. They are subject to the same open meetings and public meetings act as we are as the city. So all of the meetings are published, they're posted. Many of the TIRZs have their own website. And so the public can simply, they can actually go, there's a really great portal that planning department has created called My City. And so if someone goes to that portal and put in their address, it'll provide a lot of information, including jurisdictions. Or you can look at your tax record, your central district tax record. And if your property is within the boundaries of a TIRZ, it'll have that reference on your tax record. So any property owner will know whether or not they're impacted by TIRZ.
So if we go back to the mid-90s when we had our first TIRZ, I mean, that's over 30 years of history working with this as a tool for economic development. How would you grade this tool at this point? It seems pretty effective to me. What do you think?
I believe that many council members will also agree that but for the TIRZ, economic development would not happen within their respective council districts. I would say the same thing is the TIRZ allows us to use resources for the purpose of attracting investment. We have an amazing public works team, right? Randy Mackay is amazing at what he does. They're responsible for maintaining all of this infrastructure. They have a big responsibility. It is our responsibility to make sure that the infrastructure that is in place has a specific purpose. It's not just building a street. It's building a street or improving sidewalks or adding turn lanes, because now we have traffic. People are in an area that's a major shopping area. We want to make sure that people are moving safely. But the whole objective of that roadway and those improvements is to stimulate our economy. So what we do is similar, but it has a different objective, a different purpose.
There are a lot of benefits. I mean, you have those economic benefits. Clearly, it's the Economic Development Office, but the physical benefits that come with that, brand new roads. I mean, nobody likes sitting through the construction and the traffic, but when they're done, it's gorgeous. It's like a fresh neighborhood, if you will.
Absolutely. So when people find out that I work for the city of Houston, it never fails. Someone will always make a comment about, when are you guys going to do something about the streets? And I'm like, we're doing something about the streets. Randy's is tackling that, but the streets that I build is intended to have a high return on investment. I think that's what people need to really understand about the TIRZ is we look at the return on investment. So I'll give you an example. Levy Park, Emancipation Park, those are investments from the TIRZ. We built those parks. We invested millions of dollars. And if you look at all of the development that has occurred in and around those parks, the townhomes that are coming up, the lofts, the restaurants that are opening up, because we created this amazing amenity that now people want to have access to. And there's a return. We get sales taxes. We get mixed beverage taxes. We get an increase in property taxes. Even though a large portion goes within the zone, there's also development that happens outside of the boundaries of the zone that is spurred by the investment that has happened within the zone. And those aren't impacted by the zone. Those dollars go directly to the general.
The zone itself has an impact that spreads out, right? Yeah, in a good way.
The zone is a catalyst. I mean, if you look at it, the zone is the catalyst. And if we treat that catalyst in that way, and we make the right kind of investment, you are going to see investment happen in and around that zone. But you will also see this investment that happens as a result of it. And it continues to kind of, it perpetuates more and more investment that is outside of the zone, but it has been benefited by the creation of the zone.
And to your point, whenever you have one of these zones, there is the infrastructure part. You've got the road, you've got the sewer system, but then you got the physical stuff, the buildings and the other parts of that. It's multi-purpose in that sense.
It is multifaceted. It is very complicated.
I can see that.
Need that really tries to simplify this program, and they'll ask, does the city have a plan to sunset and dissolve TIRZs? I think, we have to evaluate each of these zones on a case-by-case basis. Is it still serving an objective, even if that objective may have altered slightly or may have changed slightly? All TIRZs are created with a project and financing plan, and so we define what those project priorities are when we create the TIRZ. And sometimes we have to amend those project plans because the community evolves, the need changes, and the state statute allows the flexibility to be able to do that. So yes, it has many, many benefits.
The examples you gave were good ones. I think everybody loves the parks. Emancipation's a beautiful one. Levy Park was another example. What are some other examples of TIRZs that people would recognize? Say, well, you know what? I didn't even know that was a TIRZ, maybe.
Downtown. All of the Bagby Street, that was financed by TIRZ. So you've got, downtown is really unique in that there is a tax increment reinvestment zone. It's Market Square, so it was the third TIRZ that was created. So it was the 1990s. Market Square and the TIRZ was created in part to redevelop the Rice Hotel into the Rice Loft, right? And so that history goes way back. But that area has now, as the downtown area has grown and we've attracted more investment, so has the boundaries of the zone. Now, in addition to extending the life, we may also extend or change the boundaries. So what may have been, a smaller geographic area could be expanded depending on where the needs are. So downtown has had several expansions so that a larger portion of the downtown is contained within the zone.
Interesting. Are there any current projects or ones that are coming up that you're especially excited about?
Well, the one that I mentioned, the public safety campus, I'm super excited about that because, in addition to building the campus, the TIRZ acquired an apartment complex that had been more than an eyesore. It was highly deteriorated. It had been abandoned. There had been multiple fires there. The Westview Apartments, I think the news reported on it many times. But the TIRZ acquired that property, and I'll tell you why that's exciting to me. Deteriorated and abandoned buildings is a contrary to economic development. It is the antithesis of economic development, right? And so the fact that we were able to acquire and demolish, that solved for an economic development challenge, number one, because we got rid of something that was preventing more investment. No investor is going to invest next to a building that is going to bring down the value or that may minimize the number of patrons that will visit that. So that one excited because it got rid of an eyesore, so it improved economic development opportunities immediately, and then we were able to solve for public safety and detention. That is like a win-win-win, and the community applauded that one. This was one where there was no need to try to get to a mutual yes. It was like an easy. It was
an easy yes.
It was an easy yes. It was like, yes, we all need.
They're not all like that, but when you get one.
Then no. The majority of them are not like
right.
that, no.
Right. But that's part of your job. And do you enjoy that part and the negotiating, the kind of figuring it out? How do we bring everybody together to really make this work for the greater good of the city?
There is never a dull moment in our office because nothing gets repeated. So even when we are able to negotiate what we think is a template type of agreement, because the city is so diverse, because the communities are so different, because the needs vary so dramatically, those things are never repeated in this exact form, right? So it almost always requires us to look at what we did before and ask ourselves, does the same model work for this situation, for this community, for this type of development? Very rarely is the answer yes. We have very few templates that we could just apply. So, and I say that to say that we really take our time to vet and to assess and to evaluate. Nothing is a cookie cutter approach in our.
It's not just a rubber stamp. Each one of these TIRZs is really focused on. It gets the attention that it deserves, I guess, in that sense.
It does. Each TIRZ was created for a specific purpose, and those purposes vary throughout this.
And you really want to identify that purpose. You got to know before you get into it.
You have to know because you have to be able to measure your success against those objectives and those purposes, right? So you look at why it's created and you ask yourself, are we being successful in making these things happen and accomplishing these objectives that we set out to? If the answer is not yes, then we have to reevaluate. Do we need to change the objective? Or do we need to change something about how this zone was created so that we could be successful to reach those objectives?
And to your earlier point, even as time goes on, we always have the ability to adjust if needed. What would be a message that you have to Houstonians who really want to make a difference where they live? Maybe they see an abandoned building. They say, oh, maybe this could be a TIRZ. Is there anyone they can talk to or anyone they can call?
Yeah, they can. I mean, so my telephone number is available online, and it's actually, you get me, right? I mean, my assistant may answer the phone, but oftentimes it's not, just going into like an automatic voice.
Right, some voicemail closet somewhere, right?
It's answered. We are a small team, and we are very committed and intentional about the work that we do. So if someone sees an abandoned building, yes, reach out and say, hey, are there plans to redevelop this abandoned building? I will also mention another program that is going to be really, really important is the Opportunity Zone program. It's a federal program. The first program was enacted in 2017 under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And it is going to be renewed. It's a 10-year program. And so now under the Big Beautiful Bill Act, the Opportunity Zone 2.0, the reason that's so important is because of what you just said. This is exchange of capital gains taxes can be eliminated or deferred if those capital gains are invested in opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are underinvested, underserved, high poverty communities. So this is really an opportunity for investment to come into communities that might otherwise be overlooked or not considered. So we're going to be rolling this program out in January of 2027. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that program, investors, developers, and this is one that we really truly partner with the community because we want to understand from the community what the needs are. What is deficient in your neighborhood? What do you need in your neighborhood so that the community can be stronger and more sustainable? Oftentimes it's retail, it's a grocery store. It's nothing usually over fancy. It's really just making sure that their basic needs have been met. And this Opportunity Zone program, we were highly successful in our first 10-year program. We're doing things much more collaboratively. We're working with the medical center. We're working with other agencies, large agencies and institutions to make sure that we are identifying and submitting those zones that we think will be most likely to attract investment so we can maximize that program.
So if you had to pick one thing maybe that you're most excited about when you look into our city's future from an economic development standpoint, like where do we stand? How is Houston? To me, maybe I'm biased because I've lived here for so long, but it feels like a healthy city. How do you see it?
You should be biased. I am quite biased. And so I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this. And it's my job. So of course I'm going to say but our economy is just really great. It's really strong. We talk about the diversity and we're usually referring to people or cultures, but our economy has become so much more diverse. If you've been in Houston for, since the 1980s, you know that we were a dominant oil and gas industry. Now, oil and gas industry makes up about 35 to 40% of our economy. And so we're so much more diverse, which makes us much more resilient. So I love that. And I also love that we continue to create these sub-industries. And so the sub-industry that I'm most excited about is what's happening around the advisor recently, I'm sorry, not advisor. The other big,
is it an employer? No.
No, so it's.
What can I say to trigger something in your brain about it?
Company.
Oh, goodness. Eli Lilly. That's right. That's okay.
So one of the sub-industries is what we're doing in the pharmaceutical. And so Eli Lilly announced, they announced initially that they were going to make a $2 billion investment. That investment has gone up. And then there's a second pharmaceutical company that has recently announced that it is also looking at the Houston region. What that means is that there are companies that are going to be part of their supply chain that will want to locate near this major investment, right, in this major manufacturing company. There are also companies that might be part of the downstream, right, maybe customers or users of those products that will also want to come into Houston. So when we're able to create sub-industries or grow our ecosystem, leveraging the medical center, for instance, to me, that is a great story. And that is how Houston has grown and evolved. We started off with what our strengths were, and we continued to build on those strengths and kept creating sub-industries and new industries. And the reason it feels organic is because it is. We didn't force industries. Industries grew out of need, necessity, and opportunity.
It's like a natural evolution that sort of occurred. Yeah.
I think that's Houston.
And
the Houston.
And the diversity of the economic picture really makes us resilient in that sense. And speaking of diversity, well, we've got, thousands of people from all over the world here this summer for World Cup. I have to ask you before we go, have you seen any games? Have you caught the World Cup fever at all?
Okay, I'm a city executive, and I'm not saying that, I make pennies, but have you seen the price of those tickets? So, but I did get to experience some of the Fan Fest. And what I love the most is seeing people who are new to the city or people who have come back to visit the city loving the city. Like the energy is just crazy. The excitement, part of it is because of the game, but I think a large part of it is because of the warmth and the hospitality. I saw a reel of somebody that posted something a couple days ago, and he and his brother are here. He didn't say the country they were from, but they were visiting. And he goes, people don't really understand the food scene here in Houston. Like, I thought he was going to talk about the game and fun and all the hoopla around the sporting event. But no, he was talking about food. He goes, we've been here 7 days. We've never eaten at the same restaurant. And he said every restaurant experience was amazing. And he said we had food, we had Italian and Mexican. And, we did not have the same culture of food any given 2 days in a row.
Correct.
And he goes, the only drawback is that we eat so much and they serve such large portions that we have to limit our restaurants. Because we would like to sample and experience multiple restaurants while we're here. So when I hear things like that, I'm like, this is what our city is. Yeah. This is who we are.
It's beautiful. Beautiful picture you've painted, Gwen. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.